Las Vegas just spent $1.4 billion drilling a tunnel under a dying lake, and 2.3 million people are betting their lives that it works. Right now, one of the most famous cities on Earth survives on a single source of water: one lake. And that lake has been slowly disappearing for 20 years. By 2022, it had dropped so low that Las Vegas was months away from running completely dry. Not a shortage, not restrictions, gone. So they did something no city had ever tried before. They drilled 3 miles straight through solid rock, deep beneath the floor of Lake Mead itself, to reach water that no drought could ever touch. They called it the third straw. It took 7 years to build and cost $1.4 billion. It should have saved everything. But here is what nobody is talking about. The lake is still draining. The tunnel only goes so deep, and there is a hard limit at the bottom, a point where even this billion-dollar miracle becomes completely useless. So did Las Vegas just secure its future? Or did they just drill the world's most expensive hole into a problem that has no solution? Las Vegas was never supposed to exist. The city sits in the Mojave Desert, one of the most unforgiving stretches of land in North America. Annual rainfall averages just 4 inches. Summer temperatures regularly crack 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground is dry, cracked, and ancient, baked by a sun that shows no mercy and cooled by nothing. There are no rivers running through it, no natural lakes within reach, no underground aquifers large enough to sustain a city of any real size. By every measurement nature has ever offered, this was a place where a major city simply could not survive. And yet, more than 2.3 million people call it home. In 1940, Las Vegas was a railroad town of roughly 8,000 residents. Modest, dusty, easy to overlook. Then came the casinos, the highways, the air conditioning, and the American appetite for reinvention that has never once known when to stop. The population exploded in ways that urban planners had never modeled and water managers had never prepared for. By the 1970s, the city was growing faster than nearly anywhere else in the country. By the 1990s, it had become one of the fastest expanding metro areas in American history. The desert did not slow it down. Nothing did. Today, the Las Vegas Valley houses over 2.3 million permanent residents and welcomes 40 million tourists every single year. 40 million people who shower, drink, flush, and fill pools in the middle of a desert that receives less rainfall annually than most cities get in a single week. All of them need water. All of them assume it will be there when they turn on the tap. The numbers behind that assumption are staggering. Las Vegas consumes approximately 300,000 acre-feet of water every year. That is nearly 98 billion gallons. To put that in terms that actually mean something, it is enough water to submerge the entire island of Manhattan under 3 feet of liquid, and then do it again, every single year. That is not the water budget of a cautious city making careful choices in a difficult environment. That is the water budget of a place that grew as though the desert were a minor inconvenience rather than an existential threat. And nearly 90% of every single drop comes from one place, one lake, fed by one river, managed by one agency trying to solve an impossible equation every single day. A booming city, a shrinking river, and a single lake standing between 2.3 million people, and a catastrophe that most of them have never once been asked to imagine. The lake was already starting to disappear. The Colorado River does not look like the lifeline of the American West. It looks like a river, brown, winding, unremarkable from a distance. But 40 million people across 7 states depend on it to survive, and for more than a century, the rules governing who gets how much of it have been built on a foundation that was flawed from the very first day it was signed. In 1922, representatives from 7 western states gathered to divide the Colorado River's water among themselves. The agreement they produced, known as the Colorado River Compact, allocated the river's entire flow based on measurements taken during some of the wettest decades in the region's recorded history. At the time, the numbers seemed reasonable. The river was flowing. The future looked generous. Nobody stopped to ask whether the data they were working from reflected long-term reality or simply an unusually lucky stretch of years. Scientists now know the answer. The compact allocated more water than the river actually produces in most years. That miscalculation was not a minor rounding error. It was a structural flaw baked into the foundation of water policy across the entire American Southwest. And for a century, it has been quietly accumulating, growing heavier with every decade of population growth, every new city, every new farm drawing from a river that was never as limitless as the original document assumed. Las Vegas inherited that flawed promise. So did Phoenix. So did Los Angeles. So did millions of farmers across Arizona and California who planted entire harvests against allocations the river could not consistently honor. The water Las Vegas depends on flows into Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, stretching across the Nevada-Arizona border in the shadow of Hoover Dam. It was built during an era when the Colorado seemed inexhaustible. It was designed to store surplus in wet years and release it during dry ones. For decades, the system worked. Then the dry years started arriving without the wet ones to balance them. There is a number that keeps water engineers awake at night. That number is 895 feet. That is the elevation at which Lake Mead reaches what is known as dead pool, the point at which water can no longer flow past Hoover Dam under any circumstances whatsoever. At that level, the pumps still exist. The pipes are still there. But the water they were built to reach is simply gone, sitting below their openings, inaccessible and irretrievable. Las Vegas was drinking from a lake built entirely on a broken promise, and the lake was already running out of time. Las Vegas has always known it was living on borrowed time, so it built its survival in stages, one pipe at a time, hoping each solution would outlast the problem it was designed to solve. The first intake pipe, what water engineers call intake number 1, was constructed in 1971. It was straightforward infrastructure for its era. A pipe positioned at an elevation of 1,050 feet above sea level, pulling water directly from Lake Mead and pumping it toward a thirsty and rapidly growing city. At the time, it seemed like more than enough. Lake Mead was full. The Colorado River was flowing. The idea that the lake could ever drop low enough to threaten the intake seemed almost theoretical, the kind of worst-case scenario planners acknowledge once and then quietly file away. Water managers planned for growth. They did not plan for disappearance. By 1993, the population had doubled, and then doubled again. Intake number 1 alone could no longer guarantee the supply security that a city growing this fast demanded. So the Southern Nevada Water Authority built a second pipe. Intake number 2, positioned slightly lower at an elevation of 1,000 feet, was designed as a backup, an insurance policy against the possibility that lake levels might one day fall far enough to compromise the first. It was a cautious, forward-thinking decision. Engineers felt confident. Officials felt prepared. It still was not enough. Both intakes were engineered for a world where Lake Mead stayed reasonably full, a world where the Colorado River delivered what the 1922 compact had promised. A world that by the early 2000s was already vanishing beneath the weight of 2 decades of drought, rising temperatures, and relentless demand that never once paused to ask whether the supply could keep up. The decline was slow at first, almost imperceptible. A few feet per year, easy to explain away as a temporary dry spell that the next good winter would erase. Then it accelerated. The reassuring narrative of natural cycles started sounding less convincing with every new measurement. By July 2022, Lake Mead had dropped to just over 1,040 feet in elevation. Intake number 1 was operating dangerously close to its functional limit. The Bureau of Reclamation projections were no longer hedging. Continued decline was not just possible, it was probable. Inside the Southern Nevada Water Authority, The internal alarm was no longer quiet. The city that should never have existed was now staring directly at a future that the original engineers had never imagined, and the original pipes were never built to handle. Something had to go deeper. The only question was whether it was even possible. The plan was audacious. The execution was nearly impossible. Engineers at the Southern Nevada Water Authority had a single objective: build a third intake pipe positioned so deep beneath Lake Mead's surface that no drought in recorded history could ever reach it. Not close to the bottom. Below it. Through the bedrock underneath the lake bed itself, reaching water at an elevation of 860 feet. Lower than Dead Pool. Lower than anything either existing intake could touch. Lower than any municipal water intake ever constructed in the United States. To get there, they would need to drill a tunnel 3 miles long through solid volcanic basalt, some of the hardest rock on the continent, while working hundreds of feet below an active reservoir holding trillions of gallons of water directly overhead. One mistake, one miscalculation, one crack in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The consequences could not be undone. Construction began in 2008. From the very first day, nothing was easy. A massive tunnel boring machine nicknamed Sandy by the crews who operated her was assembled underground and set to work grinding through the basalt layer by layer. Sandy measured 23 feet in diameter, wide enough to drive 2 vehicles side by side through the finished tunnel. She was precise, powerful, and still completely unprepared for what the geology had waiting. Unexpected rock formations forced crews to stop and completely recalculate. Equipment broke down under pressures that the engineering models had underestimated. Water seeped through fissures in the rock, threatening to flood active sections of the tunnel before sealing work could catch up. The heat underground was relentless. Workers operated in confined spaces, deafened by the grinding of steel against ancient volcanic stone, acutely aware that an active lake sat directly above their heads. Maintaining tunnel alignment over 3 full miles through shifting volcanic formations required constant measurement corrections. A deviation of even a few degrees, compounded across that distance, could mean missing the target shaft entirely. Every calculation carried consequences that could not be undone. Sandy completed her run in 2014. The tunnel was sealed, tested, and declared operational in 2015. The engineering had worked. The impossible had been built. The bill arrived with it. $1.4 billion, paid entirely by Southern Nevada residents through water rates that climbed year after year while the tunnel was being drilled beneath the lake, keeping them alive. A tax on survival that nobody voted for and almost nobody fully understood. Critics called it obscene. Environmentalists called it the wrong message entirely. But by 2022, without the third straw already operational, water managers estimated Southern Nevada would have faced emergency restrictions severe enough to shake the entire region's economy to its foundation. The city had bought something. The question was exactly what. The third straw was built for a crisis. The crisis arrived exactly on schedule. Through the early 2000s, Lake Mead had been draining in a slow, steady, almost imperceptible decline. Easy to dismiss. Easy to explain away as a temporary dry cycle that the next good winter would correct. Water managers watched the measurements and told themselves the system was resilient. The river would recover. The lake would stabilize. It always had before. It did not recover. It kept falling. In 2021, federal water managers declared the first ever shortage on the Colorado River. Not a warning, not a projection. An official federal designation that triggered mandatory water cuts across multiple states simultaneously for the first time in the river's managed history. The moment water policy experts had spent decades warning about had quietly arrived, buried in a government press release that most Americans never read. By mid-2022, Lake Mead had dropped to just over 26% of its total capacity, the lowest level ever recorded since the reservoir first filled in the 1930s. A lake that once stretched 247 square miles and plunged 532 feet at its deepest point was hollowing out from the inside, shrinking back toward the canyon walls that had held it for nearly a century. The retreating shoreline told a story that the numbers alone could not fully capture. Boat docks sat stranded hundreds of feet from the water's edge, their ramps descending uselessly into cracked, bleached lakebed. A bathtub ring of white mineral deposits climbed the canyon walls like a geological scar, marking every foot the lake had lost over 2 decades of decline. And then the ghosts appeared. Old foundations emerged from the exposed lakebed. Submerged roads resurfaced. The ruins of St. Thomas, a resort town that had sat underwater since 1938, reappeared as though the lake were surrendering its secrets along with its water. Lake Mead was not just shrinking, it was revealing its own history as it disappeared. Then something unexpected happened. The winter of 2022 to 2023 delivered record-breaking snowpack across the Rocky Mountains. The reservoir rose more than 20 feet in a single year. The Bureau of Reclamation scrapped its decline projections and rewrote its outlook from the ground up. It felt, briefly, like relief. Scientists urged immediate caution. One exceptional snow year does not rewrite 20 years of overuse. The lake remained more than 160 feet below full capacity. The recovery was real. It was also fragile, weather-dependent, and built on conditions that climate models suggested would become increasingly rare with every passing decade. The third straw had been built for exactly this uncertainty, for the years when the snow simply does not fall. Drilling deeper was only half the strategy. The other half was using less. Las Vegas understood early that engineering alone could not solve a math problem this severe. A city consuming 98 billion gallons of water every year, drawing from a shrinking lake in a desert getting hotter every decade. No tunnel, no matter how deep, could outrun those numbers forever. The math would always catch up. So alongside the third straw, the Southern Nevada Water Authority built something equally ambitious. Not a pipe, not a tunnel, a culture. The results are genuinely remarkable. Since 2002, Las Vegas has cut its per capita water consumption by more than 40%, not despite population growth. During it, the metro area added hundreds of thousands of new residents over that same period and still managed to use less total water than it did 2 decades ago. By any measurement, it is one of the most dramatic urban conservation turnarounds in American history, achieved in a desert city that the rest of the world assumed was too reckless and too addicted to excess to ever change course. The mechanics behind that number are deliberate and far-reaching. Las Vegas recycles approximately 99% of its indoor water. Treated wastewater discharged back into Lake Mead earns the city return flow credits, which count directly against its annual Colorado River allocation. Every gallon used indoors and returned to the system is effectively used twice. It is an elegant solution to an impossible equation, and no other major American city does it at the same scale. Outdoor water is where the real battle was fought. Nevada passed legislation banning ornamental grass, the decorative turf lining medians, surrounding office parks, and covering suburban front yards without serving any functional purpose whatsoever. The removal program saves an estimated 6 billion gallons of water annually. 6 billion gallons that previously evaporated under a desert sun, serving no purpose except appearance. Residential water use became the next frontier. Nevada proposed legislation giving water authorities the power to cap household consumption at roughly 163,000 gallons per year, the first regulation of its kind anywhere in the United States. The proposal generated friction. Residents pushed back. But the underlying logic was undeniable. When a resource is genuinely finite, unlimited individual consumption is not a right. The system can continue to afford. Las Vegas had changed everything it could change. drilled everything that could be drilled, conserved everything that could be conserved. The city had done what no other desert metropolis had ever managed at the same scale, and the lake was still not safe. The tunnel was built. The conservation was working. None of it was enough. The tunnel is built. The conservation is working. The lake has partially recovered, and none of it is enough. Climate projections for the American Southwest are not ambiguous. The region is getting hotter, drier, and more unpredictable. Every assumption that water infrastructure was ever built on is now under stress. The models that once predicted gradual, manageable change have been repeatedly revised toward faster timelines and more severe outcomes. What scientists described as a worst-case scenario 15 years ago is now increasingly discussed as a likely baseline. The emergency that was supposed to arrive decades from now has a habit of showing up ahead of schedule. The third straw reaches water at 860 feet elevation. That number was chosen carefully, deep enough to access water even when Lake Mead drops below the threshold at which Hoover Dam can generate electricity. But the Colorado River system has a harder limit. Full Dead Pool sits at approximately 895 feet. Below that level, the third straw itself becomes irrelevant. The intake still exists. The tunnel is still intact. But the water it was built to reach is simply no longer there. The most expensive municipal water intake in American history becomes, at that point, an extraordinarily costly monument to a problem that engineering could not fully solve. Paleoclimate research delivers the most unsettling layer of all. Tree ring data and geological records show that the Colorado River Basin has experienced mega droughts lasting decades. Conditions far more severe and far longer than anything in the modern instrumental record. The 20-year dry stretch that drained Lake Mead to 26% capacity may not have been an anomaly. It may have been a preview of conditions that the basin has survived before and will face again. Beneath the surface, a separate threat builds quietly. As Lake Mead's levels fluctuate dramatically, sediments on the lakebed are disturbed and remobilized. Those sediments carry heavy metals and toxic residues from decades of mining operations and industrial activity along the shoreline. Rising water floods contamination sites once considered safely contained when submerged and stable. The third straw secures access to water. It does not guarantee the quality of what comes through it. Las Vegas is not unique. It is simply the most visible city on the most visible fault line of a water crisis stretching across the entire American West. Phoenix watches the same lake. Los Angeles draws from the same river. Farmers across Arizona and California irrigate with the same allocation that the 1922 compact promised, and the Colorado River can no longer consistently deliver. The 2026 renegotiation of that compact will force decisions that no tunnel can make. How 7 states divide a shrinking resource will determine whether cities grow, whether farms survive, and whether the engineering marvel beneath Lake Mead ever gets tested at its absolute limits. The desert is still winning. The third straw is real. The conservation numbers are real. The tunnel sits 3 miles beneath Lake Mead right now, pulling water from depths that no drought in recorded history has ever reached. That is not nothing. That is extraordinary. A city that should never have existed looked at an impossible problem and refused to stop engineering its way forward. That counts for something. It counts for a great deal. But the tunnel did not solve the desert, and the desert is still winning. What Las Vegas built beneath Lake Mead bought something genuinely valuable. Time. Time for conservation to scale. Time for policy to catch up with physics. Time for the snowpack to return and the lake to breathe again. Time for 7 states to sit across a table and make decisions that their predecessors spent a century avoiding. The third straw did not end the crisis. It postponed the worst version of it, and in a desert running out of options, that is not nothing. Whether that time gets used wisely is not an engineering question. The tunnel is already drilled. The pipes are already in place. The hard part now has nothing to do with rock or machinery or billion-dollar construction budgets. The hard part is political. It is cultural. It is the decision that 40 million people across 7 states have not yet fully been forced to make about how to share something that is running out. The water still flows. But somewhere beneath Lake Mead's surface, the clock is still running.